Ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is Jeremy Smith. About 2 years ago, I brought you guys a video review of the Nikon D3400. And last year, I brought you guys a video comparing the D3400 to Canon's Rebel T6. As per usual, after this little bit of time, we now see some new cameras in this entry-level DSLR segment. Now Canon, they introduced a camera called the Rebel T7, and no, I'm not talking about the T7i. Unfortunately though, oddly enough, the T7 is a camera that I've never seen. It is present on Canon's website, but I've never seen it in a local store. The local Best Buy doesn't sell it. Bedford Camera and Video does not sell it. And you can't even find it on Amazon, so I'm not sure what the deal is with that camera. However, Nikon, they do have an update that I have in my hands now called the D3500. And whenever this camera was introduced, I was scouring the spec sheet trying to find some differences, but what I saw was lots of the same things. It still is 24 megapixels. I still saw the same 100 to 25,600 ISO range. I still saw the same 11-point focus system, the same 5 frame a second drive burst rate. I saw the same 1080p at 60 frames a second, and I started thinking, what on earth is the difference? But after looking at the camera in person, it became apparent that most of the differences are physical, and we're going to get to that in a little bit here. But I did notice that Nikon mentioned that while the sensor resolution is exactly the same, they state that it is actually an updated image sensor compared to its predecessor. So after getting the camera in my hands, the first thing I wanted to do was test their claims. I waited a little bit until Adobe did all their updates so that way I could open up the raw files in standardized software. And after doing my famous kitchen pantry test, that's a trademark thing, not really, but yeah. Anyways, after doing that, I shot some images at 100 ISO, and then I shot some images at 1600 ISO, and then I went up to the max of 25,600 ISO, and I kind of compared the differences. And compared to the 3400, I didn't see a lot of differences. However, the main thing I did notice was that the 3500 actually exposes a little bit more pleasing in my opinion. The 3400 has a tendency to expose a little bit brighter. As always, I did this test on auto white balance and aperture priority with the aperture set to 5.6, and I just varied the ISO value. And consistently I saw that the 3500 actually exposed things more pleasing, while the 3400 erred on the edge of being a bit too bright. So that was something I noticed back whenever I tested that against the Rebel. So that was a big difference I saw, but overall, the image quality doesn't seem to change a whole lot between these cameras, which is not a bad thing because the 3400 is already really great in terms of its image quality. The biggest differences though that I see in this new camera all has to do with the physicality. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the camera and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Taking a closer look at the Nikon D3500 compared to the D3400, I'd like to go ahead and remind everyone that if you're interested in purchasing either of these cameras, or any camera for that matter, take a look at the link in the description below, and that will take you to my affiliate's website, Bedford Camera and Video. Once there, whenever you purchase your camera, use the code THEGREAT at checkout, and that way they will know that I sent you. This helps me continue to bring you guys exciting videos on even more cameras. Okay, so taking a look at both cameras here, as I mentioned, most of the differences are physical. The D3500 is very similar to previous models in this range, although now we see this slightly deeper grip. This is something that we first saw on Nikon's D750, then we saw it on the 7000 series cameras like the 7500, we saw it on the 5600, and now it's made it down to cameras in this range as well. I would encourage you to go to a shop and put this camera in your hands. I've noticed that a lot of people, I'd say the majority of people, like this deeper grip. Some people do not, so your mileage may vary. But yeah, you can see how on this camera I have a much deeper grip. On the 3400, you can see how it's kind of a slightly chunkier, sort of old school Nikon design. It's a little bit different there. They did manage to shave quite a bit of weight off the 3500. I think this is an important thing for this segment of camera because so many people are coming from their smartphones to their first interchangeable lens camera. So this is a good thing for Nikon. The battery life is up a little bit too over the previous model, although I don't think this is a big deal. The 3400 still had excellent battery life, but it is worth mentioning that this camera's battery life is a bit greater. A couple things that I noticed, aside from just the weight and shape of the camera, we see that all the buttons have sort of migrated over here to the right-hand side. I'm not really sure how I feel about this, but this basically makes the camera very reminiscent of Nikon's new Z6 and Z7 mirrorless. Write me in the comments, guys. Let me know what you think. I'm not really sure if I'm sold on this sort of like right-hand control layout. The other thing I notice about this camera is that, unfortunately, there's a couple things missing in terms of controls. I loved how on the, I think it started with like the D3200, maybe the 3100, they started putting this little option over here for this customizable function button. And on a camera like a 3400, that customizable function button by default changes ISO, which I thought was really, really nice. So whenever you'd be in here, you could go in and you could press this function button and hold it with your thumb, and then you could change your ISO like this. This is really, really good for users that have gotten a little bit more advanced with their shooting. Sadly though, on the 3500, this button is nowhere to be found. But I did like that they decided to take the flash button and put it back here. I think it's a lot more accessible. It doesn't quite hide out as much as it did on the D3400. So that is an upside. Another little downside that I noticed, and yes, guys, you can complain at me all you want. This is kind of petty of me to mention, but I used to like Nikon's little logo right here. You know how it looks kind of nice, 3400. Now I think they replaced it by a guy or girl at the factory with a Sharpie marker, and they just sort of write it on there now, D3500. Yeah, so whatever. Another little thing I noticed is that on the 3500, it no longer has the infrared receiver. So like on the 3400, if you wanted to use Nikon's MLL3 wireless remote, you had the ability to do so. And basically your receiver for that is right here on the front of the camera. So you could actually go in and you could just press your drive mode button here, and you could go in and you could go over to the MLL3 remote. On the 3500, that is no longer present. So we don't have that ability. But the upside on the 3500 is that on this camera, you can actually use the SnapBridge app to actually fire the camera. The 3400 just allowed SnapBridge to be used to transfer your images, but now thanks to a Bluetooth update, you can actually fire the camera remotely here. Although it is worth mentioning that Nikon still makes you go up to higher models like the 5600 if you actually want to see the live view. So you can fire, but just no live view whenever you're using the app. Aside from that though, guys, this is a pretty nice little, it's a pretty nice little incremental upgrade. It's not really an evolution, or a revolution rather, it's more of an evolution. So hopefully soon we'll see Nikon introduce more features in this segment. I would love to see some things like on-chip phase detection for better video autofocus. I would also like to see a slightly more improved sensor. So I've seen a few cameras using the 26 megapixel APS-C sensor. Hopefully we'll see something like that coming to the entry-level cameras pretty soon. What would you guys like to see on this segment of camera? Write me in the comments below. I definitely would like to hear your thoughts on that. Also, if you're curious about how this camera compares to the Canon Rebel T6, I would encourage you to check out my D3400 versus Rebel T6 video, because I don't think that there's any major differences between the 3500 compared to the T6 versus the 3400 compared to the T6. So check out the 3400 versus T6 video. And also don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I will be making more videos very, very soon. If you have any questions, as always, write me in the comments below. And until next time, guys, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.